Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. Adam and John, once again, if you can believe it, like twice in a
I
month or
was say
so.
twice in a month. I'm back. Not really.
Um, Back with another podcast. We're going to do, with this guy's one of these guys maybe you've seen on Instagram as the Great White Saddle Hunter. And I want to get into that. Like, that's a pretty bold statement, right? Um, Matt Lehr, kind of local to us. You're what, Grand Haven area?
Holland. Yep.
Holland. Yeah.
Yep.
So not far at all. And hooked up with him through Instagram. I think it was last year. And for whatever reason, John, I think he messaged me and was like, "Hey man, I like what you guys are doing. I don't really have any like hunting partners or buddies. I'm kind of like looking for someone to hunt with." And I'm like scrolling through his stuff and I'm like, "I think you're kind of like out of my league, bud. Like I think you're doing a little bit better than I am, but I can see what we can come up with." And then you ended up needing a ticket to the Mobile Hunters Roadshow and found one for you and got to meet you in person and just been kind of bouncing off each other since then. But I feel like, well, we'll get into like a little bit of introduction. So how are you doing, Matt?
Yeah, good. Just got back from Nebraska, and that was a grind, but yeah, feeling good. I did not actually connect with a buck down there, but we were in the deer the whole time. So I've definitely had to knock some rust off from last year. You think, you do the same setup every single year, but it still was tough the first couple times climbing up in the tree. But yeah, doing good. Excited for the season. Got a lot of different changes for me this year, so yeah, I can't wait for it to get started.
So how did you grow up hunting? Like what's your hunting background?
Yeah, I'm a little different, I think, than a lot of the people that I run into from Michigan. I didn't start until I was 23 years old. I dabbled in it just because everyone around me hunted, but none of my family hunted. And so there were a few times where a friend took me out to the woods or something like that. But when I was 23, I remember I had my best friend was from Howard City and he hunted all the time. We were at the bar and I don't know, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was like, "Hey, do you want to go hunting with me the next day, bow hunting?" I've never shot a bow. And I'm like, "Yeah, sounds fun. Let's do it." So we went up to his house, turned on the lights to the car. I'm shooting the bow and I'm like 4 inches right. He's like, "Just remember that tomorrow. You're 4 inches right." And we go and, hit the hay, get up a few hours later. And then I climbed up and we were using climbers, which was interesting my first time because the top fell and I'm like bouncing on the bottom, just scared out of my mind. And he always hunted high. So it was like, I'm watching him. We were pretty close to each other. And I had a nice 8 point, probably, I don't know, 110 inch 8 point come in within 10 yards. And I just couldn't shoot. I was froze. But after that, I was pretty hooked. And so started hunting when I was 23. Did it, pretty much the Michigan way, except we were state land always. We were mobile from the get go. So back then it was, climbers primarily. And then ran into some John Eberhart stuff and trophy line saddles. Bought one of those relatively quick into it, and I've been hunting saddles up until this year. I think for like next or the last 16 years, I think primarily. But did it the Michigan way for a long time, and so brought it down. Just want to get my bucks. That was the primary focus. Hunted state land the entire time, and then I had to take a break. We just had some family stuff going on. It was good stuff, but just needed more of my attention. I'm a all in kind of guy. So if I'm going to do something, I'm going to be obsessed about it. And I just needed my attention to be at home and had a young family. I'm older, I'm 46 now. So I had to take some time off, took about 7 years off of hunting, and then came back about 5 years ago. And when I came back, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but I had shifted my mindset and how I hunt. And it just kind of changed the game for me, which we'll get into a little bit later probably. But um prior to that, like even before I came back, I started hunting out of state quite a bit. I was, I just wasn't seeing the caliber of bucks that I wanted to see here in Michigan. They are here. I mean, I learned that later on down the road. But I was so used to watching like Drury and stuff like that that I wanted to see a bigger buck, and so I started venturing out. And the first place I ever went to was Nebraska, and shot a, I don't know what it was, probably about 120-inch 7-point, 125-inch 7-point down there. And then I was hooked to hunting out of state. So primarily did out of state, took a break for about 7-8 years, and then came back. And then the last 5-6 years been hunting out of state until this year. And now I'm focused on still some out of state stuff. Like I said, I just got back from Nebraska, but also hunting Michigan this year, pretty hard. So yeah.
So in that time, like from when you started for the original, well, so I gotta ask, like with the first time hunting, bow hunting, and all that, like, I mean, I know John's group of friends, and I know John's stories about crazy things like that. I can think of one turkey in particular. But but like, what was it like in a climber the first time? Because I remember like me learning in a climber, and not in the dark and not in the morning and not after the bar, all of these things. I know that I've taught people who, get up, they're not afraid of heights and none of this stuff. And they're like, I think I'm high enough. And I'm like, you're not high enough. I'm pretty sure I'm high enough. And I'm like, I think you're 7 feet off the ground. I'm like, no way. Just walk over there and grab the bottom of it. So like that first experience in the climber, like how did that go?
Oh man, I was terrified. So crazy enough, I was able to hook it up fine. But my buddy RJ was probably only, I don't know, 25, 30 yards from me. And we had walkie-talkies and like the little earpieces and stuff. And so he's kind of giving me instruction, like go, go, go. And I'm just watching him. And he's like, just go as high as I am. And like I said, I dropped that top bar. I was terrified at that point. And back then, I mean, we just weren't doing safety, right? Like we didn't have harnesses, especially with the climber. I mean, even after that, when I was using a climber on a regular basis, the climber kind of was your safety harness, right? You had a bar around you. You just kind of like, I think we thought that was safe. So it was pretty crazy going all the way up. But we were probably 20, 25 feet up in the air. And the climbers, I felt safe. I never like had a problem with height. When we transitioned over to putting up some tree stands, we did put up a few. That I always had a hard time with in the early days, like going up there and that's when I felt like I was almost naked, like I was going to fall off, and I hated that. But really, that wasn't a bad experience for me. I just got to it and it was fine. It was funny though, like so my roommate at the same time started hunting with us, and he went up and we brought him out. It was during the daytime, and we said, hey, just go as high as you can go. And then we came back and found him, and he was slanted down like this because he had gone like 30 feet up in the tree, and it got really thin. And like he's barely hanging on. I mean, if a deer would have walked in, there's no way he could have done anything. And we're like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, we told me to go as high as I could go. So that's actually where my name came from. We all had nicknames back then. I don't know why, but we did. And so he went up as high as we could go. We made a ton of mistakes in the early days. And this guy had been hunting, our friend who was teaching us, been hunting his whole life. His dad hunted. I mean, he was just a true Michigan hunter. I mean, he just went through the whole family. And so even on that same hunt where we found that guy kind of angling down at 30 feet, that hunt, I actually had a shot on a doe, my first shot ever. And I got so excited, I pulled the bow back and the arrow came off the rest and was sitting on the shelf. And I didn't know any better that it wouldn't fly. And so I let it go. And I swear I saw it hit the deer. I saw the deer run. I'm calling my buddy RJ going, hey, man, I got my first deer. Like, get over here. He comes over. He can't find hair. You can't find blood. He's telling me, no, you didn't hit this deer. I'm just, look, that deer's dead. She's probably just down that way. And he's like, nope, we're not leaving until we find blood. He's looking all over for about a half hour, and then he looks up in the tree. My arrow's 20 feet up in the tree, right across. And that's when he goes, "Oh, you're the great white hunter." He's like, "Yeah, look." And then just because I've hunted saddle for so long, I just threw saddle in there. So that's how I got the nickname. But yeah, so it was full of, being 20, 23 years old, never hunted before, ton of mistakes for a long time. But it was fun because we had a tight group of guys who were kind of learning as we were going, and we were like super all in, all committed. But I kind of like within a few years started like veering off from them just naturally. I didn't like sitting in the same tree stand. I liked the adventure of something new and looking at new ground and just trying different things. And they were just very settled into like, this is our spot. This is how we do it. And this is where we go. This is where we sit. And I was kind of always bumping heads with them because I'm like, I'd go set up and they would hit me on the walkie-talkie and go, "Where you at?" And I tell them that, "Well, you're cutting off my deer." And that whole concept of my deer just drove me nuts. And I was like, I gotta branch off and just go off on my own.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I ended up just going off on my own from like my family hunting camp and all that stuff, because they would tell me where I could or couldn't or what was stupid to hunt there. And like, I've hunted,
Yeah.
30 sits this season before November 14th. So like, don't tell me about like what, where I need to be. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But from that time frame, like, so what, like 16 years of
Mm-hmm.
saddle hunting, like, talk about the evolution, like what you've seen, from
Yeah.
before to tethered and then
Right.
now, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So, and don't forget I left for a couple of
Right.
years.
But you had to be
So
like the bastard, right? Like, what is
yeah.
this guy doing in the diaper?
Oh
Like a
yeah.
real, like, even now there's like some sort of like stigma, but back then I can't imagine. You had to have been looked at like you were, like wearing just wearing the crazy shit.
Yeah, yeah, but I didn't know a lot of hunters, because I started late, and so I had my small group, and we all bought saddles. They just couldn't, they didn't like them. They tried them, two or three times, and they were done with them, and they were using their stands. So, I mean, they didn't really give me a hard time about it, and I never ran into anybody else. So, there wasn't really a stigma for me with it. Um, and then the whole like John Eberhart back then started to kind of gain a little bit of ground. And so it was exciting, for me. And then when I left, so the difference was when I left the game, there was nobody. Like there was just trophy line, and the trophy line stopped. So you're using old saddles.
Right.
And then when I came back in, it was interesting because you had like saddlehunter.com, you had all of these different like chat rooms that you could go to and talk to people. And then I was watching Tethered. My dogs are going nuts. Sorry about that. Um, I was watching Tethered kind of like grow, like come out and start to like produce some really cool stuff. Um, so it was exciting to watch that. And then I started trying a bunch of different saddles. And that was fun. That was fun to be able to like go into different stuff and like my old trophy line saddle, which I still have. I love it. And I actually pulled it out last year. I was like, I'm going to go back and just reminisce and do a hunt with it. Man, it pinched the crap out of my hips, man. And now that I'm older, it was a lot worse. But I love that saddle, and I still have it. I may hunt out of it every once in a while, but I've done a tethered saddle. I've done cruiser, and then right now, and I don't think I'll ever leave. I'm on the latitude method too. To me, that is like the superior saddle. It's just is so awesome. But they're all great. I mean, there's so many good saddles out there. I've sat in so many new ones. And I think there's a different saddle for a different person. But for me, that one is phenomenal. To think that I would have never thought it could have been that comfortable. I kind of got used to being uncomfortable for the sake of like mobility. And that was the reason why I went to is I got sick of like lugging around the heavy stand, because I was always in a different spot. I was always walking a mile was normal. Like I was, that's something I'm really grateful for is the guy who taught me how to hunt. Um, that he was used to that. He was used to going out deep. He was used to walking a long ways, way back before that was cool, way before people were talking about it. So that was normal to me. And then carrying like, a 30-pound, stand on your back was normal for me. And I hated it. So that's why I went to saddle. Now I actually bought one this year. You have these tree stands that are, 5, 6 pounds. As much as I love the saddle, it's not right for every situation. So having another option is good. So I picked up a Lone Wolf .5 this year, and I used it down in Nebraska in a tree that a saddle just, I mean, you could get in it, but it would be miserable. And it was very comfortable to be able to use the .5 there. But anyways, just watching the evolution of it all and watching the technology come out about it, it's been a lot of fun from someone who just looked at it, had it one saddle back in the day. You either had the neoprene or you had the lightweight one. I had the lightweight one. And that was it. That was your options. That's all you had. So it's been awesome coming back. It almost feels like my wife was telling me, she's like, you're kind of like Captain America who was frozen and it kind of came out of the ice and like get to do all this new technology. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So when you tried out the tree stand again,
Yeah.
I mean, how weird was that? Because like I know
So
when I
weird.
sat, I mean, I grew up climbers. Like that's, I mean, started from the old bakers, which you probably, I mean, never even seen one. I mean, maybe I
Yeah.
did, but
No.
then, and then Loggy Bayou, and then, APIs, all that.
Yeah.
And then Adam finally gets me in a saddle, and the very next sit I had in a tree stand, I was like, it it felt like I was gonna fall out the whole time, like because
Yeah.
I was being static, like being tethered in the whole time, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting on a tree stand, and I'm like, how did I do this when I was a kid? Like sitting in a loggy bayou with nothing around you on
Yeah.
a big old foam seat and no harness, anything. And then now
Yeah.
I'm harnessed in, and I was like, holy, I feel like I'm gonna fall out every time. But I mean that happened to you
Well,
when you were down in Nebraska?
totally. Yeah, it was horrible. So I'm so I was down there with another guy and he's trying to watch me set up this .5 and he's just shaking his head like, man, what is going on with this guy? I thought, because I met him just recently. And so we haven't hunted before together. And then he's watching me try to set up this .5 and he's looking at me like, does this guy even know what he's doing? Does he even know how to hunt? And then I get in it and I did. I felt like, just like I said when I first started getting into tree stands, I felt like I was going to fall. I felt naked. I felt the same way, but then I actually put on my method too and use that as my harness, and I felt a lot better. I was like, I'm good now. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough for me, but like in that situation, the tree just was angled and like branched out in such a way. It was an old oak
Yeah.
that a saddle just, and it was the only tree in that area. I actually took a video that's on my Instagram. It was the only tree, and I could have gotten it with the saddle, but it wouldn't have given me the flexibility as the stand did. So in that situation, it was really good. But I did feel like I'm probably not going to use it as much as I thought I would. I'm probably going to stick with the saddle for probably 90% of my sits. Just be times where I can use that, especially all day sits. I'm getting older, and as comfortable as the method is, it's still, I kind of like sitting down a little bit. I'm 46 years old this October, so my body isn't as limber as it used to be. So I'm hoping the stand will help me there. But yeah.
So beyond just the saddles and stuff like that, like
Mhm.
I want to know, because it's a problem, I feel like, because we have access. I mean, and we're guilty of it too, because we're like, oh, check this out, check this out, check this out. Like how much stuff like now that's out there, like, are you like, oh my God, I don't know how I lived without this? And then the
Mm.
other side of that is like, oh my God, why do these guys bring so much extra crap? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say this year I've experimented with more stuff than years past. And it's funny because this Nebraska trip, I was trying out like different sticks. And they're great sticks, but I have my old sticks. I just customized my old sticks from a long time ago, my old Lone Wolf sticks. I bought new Lone Wolf sticks. and I like my old ones better. I just like my old stuff actually better. It's simpler, and maybe it's just because I'm just so used to it. But that's one thing I kind of, with the saddle hunting community, I was a little sad about when I came back, is it got really gear focused, and guys were so caught up in the gear. And the only reason I went to saddle hunting was because it was lighter. I mean, really, that is it. It was lighter. I didn't have to carry a 30-pound tree stand all the way in the back. And so it's great. I love it. I do like that the tree hides me. And the way that I hunt out of it is different than what I see. Like if you look at like the saddle hunter like .com logo, it's like this guy hanging way off the side. You know, I don't hunt that way. Maybe I'm just kind of too old school and too John Eberhart, where it's like I like the tree in front of me and I like peeking along the side. And I know there's a ton of criticism about that comment. Like people say you can't do that, but you can. I've shot almost all my bucks that way. But um, I I like it if you just want to have fun with it. Like I bought a ton of crap like down at the Mobile Hunter Expo. I bought stuff that I knew I shouldn't bring in my bag, but I just wanted to have fun. You know, it was like, hey, let's have fun with gear. There's nothing wrong with that. But if people get so obsessed about it, it looks like in some of the forums that I look at, and um, I think too much attention is on that, and it should be much more on the deer, you know, and your setup and where you're at than what gear you have. I like I said, over the last couple of years, I think I've bought more stuff than I ever have in the past. Honestly, none of it makes me feel like I'm actually able to kill more deer because of it, you know. But if you're okay with just having the mindset of, hey, I'm having fun, I'm all for it. Have fun with it. Just don't get obsessed about it, thinking that it's making you the hunter that you want to be. You
Like
know,
you gotta have it to be able to do it.
you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been out and bought. You know, I've got a. I mean, for me, it's a great bow. I got a V3, you know, 27 inch, and you know, I bought all this stuff, but it doesn't change anything really. Like I realized that like all my old stuff is the stuff that I prefer, but it's have fun with it though. I don't want to. I mean, I bought a ton of crap. Go ahead, have fun with it.
Well, I think that would be like the difference between like John and I. It's like I buy all this stuff just because A, I can, and
Mhm.
B, like I want to see how it works. Like, do I think that it's like gonna help me be a better hunter? Like, no. Like I know, I think deep down, there's all of that stuff where it's like doing shit for the gram, like, you get that little dopamine hit, somebody liked
Mhm.
it or like whatever. Or, you bought this and so that was good. You're like, man, I can't get out and hunt, but like, oh, I can buy this and it'll be like super cool. And then you get it and then it just goes in a pile. Like if you could see like this room right now, like my daughter was helping me like get the camera on and get the lights up and all that stuff today. And she's like, Dad, do you think we should get you like an organizer or something for down here? And I'm like, yeah, I'm working on it. But yeah, I think I did that podcast with Cody Rich, and that's something that's always stuck with me. Like he said, like the people that obsess about gear, like they're trying to like that's what they can control. So
Mhm.
if they can't get out there and scout, if they can't do this, they want to make sure that they have all this gear, all this stuff, because that's the thing. They can't control the animal, they can't control the wind. They're, basically essentially afraid that they're going to go out there and make a mistake, but damn it, they've got the best, who's it
Mhm.
or what's it,
Looking good doing it.
yeah, well, God, the amount of times and
So
like,
you, at the beginning of that, you were saying that between you and I, like,
yeah, well, because John used to get so mad at me because I'm like, oh, I got this new stuff. I got this new stuff. Like, check this out, check this out. And he's like, what do you need all that stuff for? Like, he's like, I got this. He's went that way with like bows a little bit, but like when we first started hunting, like he had this Q2XL or whatever. This
it's the only bow that fit me
the
for years.
oldest Matthews known to man.
I still have my Feather Max. Like that thing came out in like I don't even know 90.
But it's I mean, like in like today's day and age, like when the first hunt that John and I went on together, he's got like a boonie hat with the acorn
Set
like
wafers.
set wafers like all over his like old ass scent lock suit. Like, it's not scent lock by any stretch of the
No.
imagination.
And that was
It's
the thing.
covered in acorn wafers, you know.
It was just the camouflage. Like I mean, I didn't give a shit about I'm like, I always said like scent lock, if you could fart in your scent lock and you couldn't ever smell it, then it works. But
Yeah,
I know if I
that's
rip
right.
ass in it, whew, I can smell it. Like the deer are gonna smell me.
But so I would always buy this stuff, and I'd always have new stuff. And John's like, "What are you doing?" And I wasn't not delusional that it was like going to help me hunt. It was just like I wanted to, like what you're saying. Like, I just wanted to have fun with it, and I wanted to be able to talk intelligently about it. That was all.
Yeah.
That's where'd you think I was going with that?
I was like, Tom, like I thought you were gonna say that. I'm like, well, I do that with bows though, just because, you know, now that we have kind of the means to do it, like I like to shoot the new bows but I still have, like I said, I still have that Q2 XL. One of my favorite bows, which is one of the worst, clunkiest bows, the RX1. I just rebuilt that and gave it to my son, but that's still like one of my favorite hunting bows. Like the grip on it. I mean, but
it's like an old friend.
Yeah. It's just like kind of like what you're saying. Like you know it, like you know that gear, just like your old sticks.
Yeah.
You switch to something new, and then it's like it's gonna take a while to you gotta kind of like, well, stick with it, or just go back to your old stuff that you know and are so used to.
Yeah.
So one of the arguments I feel like I get in with people, because like they listen to us because we've used all the saddles, and you know, we say, oh, this stuff is so great, and blah 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 blah. And then they're like, this isn't any lighter than my old setup. And now I think, like to your point, when you're saying like, okay, now you got a 5-pound stand, and then you know you can only make a stick so light, right? Before you can't use it. And so my like, you know, retort to that is now we're shedding a whole bunch of bulk, and you're getting some you know, a little bit more flexibility where it doesn't have to be that telephone pole tree anymore. But like the weight, if you add in all the who's it's and what's it's and all the bullshit, like you're back up there to 20 pounds, you know, 25 pounds, whatever.
Yeah. And I think people obsess too much about weight too. As much as I said I did it to go lighter, I mean, back then tree stands were 30 pounds. You know, I had a like old man tree stand, like that's what I was climbing in. And I don't know how much it actually weighed, probably around the 20-pound mark alone on itself. And that's not including your pack. That thing was just, you know, it was clunky. It made a ton of noise. So that's why I went to the saddle. That's the other part that kind of drives me nuts, is this whole shaving of ounces. Like, oh, if I get this stick, I'll you know, it shaves this many ounces, and it's like, yeah, but does it actually do what you want it to do? You know, like, does it secure you to the tree, and like, is it worth as much money as you spent for it? So the whole ounces, the ounces game drives me nuts. But again, if you're having fun doing it, I don't want to crush it too much, because I have fun tinkering around too. And there are some things that have like improved my game, like a 3-step aider, removable aider that climbs up with me. I mean, that actually did shave pounds off. Like, I went down to pretty much 2 sticks and a platform, and I can get 18 feet easy. If I really want to stretch it, I can get to 20. And that is a tool that I love. I bring it with me everywhere I go. So there is some good stuff out there, but just have fun with it. But don't think that it's going to, like, getting that thing is not going to kill your deer for you. But yeah, the ounces game drives me a little crazy. And I don't know what you were saying too about sticking with stick with the new, or like grab, or like just go back to your old. I'm man, I am stuck right in the middle of that right now, because I got these 14-inch minis from Lone Wolf, and I love the way they look, and I love the way like they give enough room for my feet to set up off of the tree. But man, my old ones are so much easier for me. I don't know why, because it's the same concept. You know, they're almost the same stick essentially, but so I want to press myself to keep moving and try to learn new gear. But I quickly in Nebraska went back to my old stuff after the first set, I was like, I'm going back to the old stuff
This
that I
guy
know
thinks
works.
I'm an idiot. I gotta redeem
Yeah,
myself.
there's a little bit of that. Yeah.
Well, that was like when we first went to the stand and sticks, you know, I sold my lone wolf climber because I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I know that
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take like 3 sits and I'm going to be like, screw this. Like I'm, you know, and oh my God, the day that I killed the 10 point in public, there's no way. Like I wanted to just throw all my stuff. Like I was so sweaty. It was already daylight. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like this is so stupid. Like this is miserable. And then, you know, 25 minutes later, I'm like tagged out. I'm sitting at the bottom of the stand eating a freaking fudge round.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna climb back up there, but I'm like, I don't even have tag. You know,
Yep.
like what am I gonna sit up there for? So but so what I wanted to talk to you about was some of that
Mm-hmm.
like out of state stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so you had said, you know, I don't really think I'm the guy, I can tell you how to kill 120s, but I'm not a big
Mm-hmm.
buck hunter. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, like I think we do a good job of like catering to everyone, so that everyone can get something out of the podcast.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's a very few people who are like listening to podcasts intently that are saying, man, if it ain't Pope and Young, I'm letting it walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of guys out there that have never killed a 100-inch buck, that have never killed a buck with their bow, that may be going on their first out of state hunt. And I mean, even myself, like on my out of state hunts, the success rate is terrible. You know, some of that is, quote unquote, wasn't big enough. And other times just like I'm not a good hunter. Like I'm not that great. So like what are the things for you? And you got to understand, like for the listener, if you're following along with Matt, or as you start to follow along with him on Instagram, you're going to see that the guy's putting on like maybe not the same miles, but like almost Jake Bush number miles. I mean, the dude's out there putting in the work. So again, buy all your who's its and what's it, but it's time in the field. It's out there
Mm-hmm.
finding the spots, figuring it out. On the out of state stuff, maybe that's a little different because you're
Mm-hmm.
not, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if you went to Nebraska and then I'm like, well, make a couple trips out there, whatever. But like on an out of state hunt, like what are the tools that you use to up your success rate on, 100+ inch deer, we'll say?
Yeah. So going out of state is the tool. That has been what really has changed the game for me. I don't know. So 2018, I got back into hunting. So I had been out for 7 or 8 years. I called my wife and I said, you know what? I think we're in a spot where I think next year, which I'm at 2019, I'll be able to go hunting again. The family seems like it's good, and things are going well. And she says, I think you can go now. This is October, like mid-October. So I call my old friends up and said, hey, who's got gear for me? Because I had my saddle and I didn't even have a bow at the time. And so I grabbed all my stuff and I went to the maps online, and I picked Indiana because it was close and the tag was cheaper. And went to Indiana and tagged out within 15 minutes of being up in the stand. Probably shot, I don't know what it was because I don't measure all my bucks. It was like a 115, 128 point. And I was home in less than 24 hours. So what I've done, and especially over the last 5 years, is I've been able to kill, 120-inch bucks within a week's time. A lot of times it happens within 4 days time period. And it's using just some of the basic principles of pinch points. I'm going during the rut. I'm busy. I'm a business owner. I've got 3 kids that are into sports and require a lot of my time. And part of the reason why I quit hunting was I was, like I said, I was all in, right? All or nothing. So I was putting in all this time when they were younger. And my wife was like, this isn't working out for me. I need you at home more. And I knew I couldn't control myself. I knew I was all in or not. So I walked away. Um, so when going back, just I think going out of state, a lot of guys are afraid of that because they don't know where to start. But OnX makes it a lot easier. Most out of state places have really good info. Like, Illinois last year, I went to Illinois for the first time, harvested, I don't know, it was about 125-inch 9-point, which is another story because I thought I was shooting 140-inch 10-point. But I went on there and you can find these WMAs and you can see how many people checked in at some of these places. You can see how many bucks were harvested, how many does were harvested. You can even see the small game stuff, so you know what you're going to be dealing with. And I was able to eliminate a bunch of, different places that were, looked like they were heavily hunted, and pick, some smaller ones that looked like they had good numbers comparative to harvest and hunter rates, but also the hunter rates were lower. So I knew I wouldn't be, battling a bunch of people. But when going out of state, really, I just focused on the rut because that's my biggest chances at a place that I'm not able to scout on a regular basis. Use the basic principles that you'll hear in every podcast, which is, getting into pinch points, getting downside, downwind of doe bedding, and really just keep it simple. Don't get too crazy. Don't try to overanalyze a lot of it. And then in the last couple of years, I've gotten more aggressive. So I've come in and I keep moving through the property, and sometimes I burn the whole property and have to move to another one until I run into action. And once I run into bucks and does, then I'm able to set up, and usually within a few days of that time, I'm able to harvest. And the other part is like managing expectations. I'm not going down there thinking that I need to shoot 140-inch or 150-inch deer. I want something that gets my heart pumping, gets me excited. Coming from Michigan, um, in the early days, like I would hunt. I remember I'd hunt all season, and if I saw, 2, 3 bucks, I mean, it was a great season for me. And a lot of them weren't what I wanted. And so here, what I've learned is a lot of these other states, the hunter numbers are down, and I'm able to run into a lot more deer. And coming with, like, I think Michigan expectations, it's allowed me to have fun. If I go in there thinking I need to shoot a Pope and Young or shoot 140-inch or 150-inch buck, then I'm probably going to be pretty stressed out, because I've got 1 week to do it. But if I'm good with shooting something that gets my heart rate going, I'm excited about it, then I'm able to get it done and have fun with it. And I think that's the main thing, is going there with like a good expectation. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but there's a lot of good, all of these different states have really good info for you to be able to find a good spot to go.
So I guess one of the things that always comes up, and like you didn't say it per se, but I feel like it's implied, right? Like you said, you want to get eyes on like the action, right?
Yeah.
And so the key phrase is always hot sign. I'm looking for hot sign, what does hot sign look like? So when you're doing that, when you're saying, okay, so you have a very truncated timetable, you're talking about a week, few days, right? How are you doing everything that they say on the podcast? Are you driving around looking at parking areas? Are you going in at gray light and wait until you see the deer? Like, how are you like stage hunting these spots to find that action?
Yeah. So I start with, online mapping is where I start probably every single trip, with the exception of Nebraska. That's a different thing. Like, I just need to know where the stuff is in Nebraska, because it's just a different, it's more like Kansas. It's just wide open, and driving by and glassing gives you a lot. But in most places in the Midwest, like Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, I'm looking online for edge. So where a bedding area, CRP runs up against a swamp, and the other corner is, you know, hardwoods. I'm looking for that type of stuff. I used to primarily focus on stuff way back off the parking lot. Now that doesn't matter to me. Anywhere the edge is coming together is important for me, and then I just go in and walk. I think the key is not to be afraid to bump anything. Don't be afraid about your scent, leaving ground scent, which sounds crazy, I know, but really just going in and trying to find what I'm looking for is like, especially during the rut, pre-rut, like late October, early November, a scrape that's been, you know, it's wet, it's been pawed up. You know, not so much rubs. Rubs are helpful, but it's hard to tell when that was laid down. You know, I mean, at least I know there's a buck in the area, but the scrapes are mainly what I'm focusing on. Pinch points is what I'm focusing on. Things that bring deer, you know, right into a certain area. But like I said, keep it simple. I cannot stress that enough. The reason why I can't stress that enough is because I overcomplicate things. I want to analyze everything, and when I do that, I get frozen, and I end up not seeing deer when I'm over analyzing, when I'm trying to really, I don't know, I guess overthink it, and it makes me cautious. It makes me kind of like go in and not really get aggressive. And I know aggressive is like the new thing to talk about, but um not being afraid to walk around, especially during the rut. And so Indiana, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I went down there, and primarily that's what I did. I just focused on edge. I didn't care what was in the parking lot. I would just go in and look for something that looked really fresh and then set up on it. And within 3 days, I had a 120 inch point buck come in off of the bedding into a scrape that I found that was wet, tore up, and three edges came together. Just keep it simple. Actually end up missing that buck, but I had a shot within, you know, 3 days of being down there. So it was good.
So when you find something like that, are you hunting that multiple days? Are you saying like this is where I'm gonna hang my hat because I know it's gonna happen, or
Mm,
how is that?
yeah, I'm too impatient for that. I mean, I've listened to a lot of people like Ryan Moose. I can't think of his last name right now, but
Glitsky.
yeah, Glitsky. Like he'll sit in an area for, you know, a long time at a pinch point. But he's doing a ton of boots on the ground scouting. He's got cameras. He knows what's going on, and that he's got years worth of data. You know, I'm going into places I've never been, and so no, I keep moving. If I'm not into the action, if nothing's coming through, then I need to move on and find it. I don't have enough time to sit and wait. That was a game changer for me when I started making the movements and just going for it. And for me, it can be a doe. A doe will keep me in a spot if she comes walking through that area. Definitely a buck will keep me there. But I need to have action every, like the whole time. If I don't, then I'm moving on. Like so if I go and sit and I don't see a deer that night, I'm moving on to another spot. I want to be where the action is actually happening. Some of these places that I hunt, they're not huge. They're about 1,000 acres. I don't hunt huge, you know, 10,000 acre pieces when I'm on the road. The 1,000 acre piece is really ideal for me. And I will just keep moving through that until I find where the bucks are. And if I bump them, then I bump them. It's okay because they're there during the rut for a reason. There's a doe that's hot, and they're gonna, you know, if I bump that one, another one's coming through. And that has been, I've tested that. That's been consistent. Like I once I figured that out, it got a lot easier.
So when you're on those hunts, what's your like? What's been their best um, kill rate? Like morning or evening or
Oh,
day, all day, or is it does it just random?
yeah, I would say it's pretty random. I hunt dark to dark, so I'll when I go into a spot, I'm there from morning till night. Um, I will make micro adjustments in a spot. So if I'm sitting and I see like, hey, 60 yards to the north, that's where it looks like I saw, I saw a doe walk through there, right? So the next day I'll move my set and get closer in. But no, I can't say I have a pattern. I mean, I've killed them in the morning. 2018, when I first came back, that was a morning hunt, and I killed that buck within 15 minutes of setting up. I've killed them midday and night. Last year in Illinois, it was last couple minutes. I Yeah, I don't think there's like a pattern for me because I'm in the rut. It's
I'm gonna say, yeah, it's the
kind
rut.
of loony during that time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Those are
Yep.
the all day sits. That's when you want to be in the woods all day.
yep, yep.
So
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 I
are
will
you
sit the whole day.
so are you adjusting midday? Like like let's say
Yeah,
you go in and you say, okay, like what's the breaking point for Matt, right? Where you're
yeah,
like, it ain't happening. Is it seeing nothing? Is it seeing deer over there? So you're like, I got to get over there. Like, well, how does your mindset go? Because I think for me personally, like John's brother, that's his jam. Like if he gets up in a tree and he's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it, he'll just move over there.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, and I mean, I've told it before on the podcast, but like the 1 year in Ohio, like I watched 5 bucks progressively get bigger,
Walk through the same draw.
60 yards away. And I'm like, man, I
Yeah.
hope they come over here. Like, what an idiot, and like now thinking back on that. And since I've, adopted this, like, it doesn't matter. Like when I'm out of state, I'm
Mhm.
moving, like I need to be over there. Like, okay, that's what we're doing,
Yeah, I don't know. It keeps evolving for me. It seems like it's a shorter amount of time every year. Last year, I moved 3 times before I killed my buck. So on that hunt, I got there in the morning, gray light, set up. I had 3 does come through, but I just wasn't feeling the spot. Like the wind was kind of shifty. I didn't see how I could make it work, even if the bucks came in. The does were just a little bit out of ways, and I didn't see anything in that area that I wanted to move to. So I just pressed in further, and I went to another ridge, set up on that around noontime, had a small buck run through. And again, for me, it was just my gut feeling. And that's the man that frustrates me in podcasts more than anything when someone says, oh, it's my gut, because it's like, well, that gives you no like info on how to actually make it happen. And the only thing I can say is like, if you keep doing this, you keep going out and you do this enough, that develops. That's the only thing I can say about it. Because last year I was in that spot. I had a small 6 point come through and again just wasn't feeling the spot. So I got down. And part of it too was, yeah, man, I'm all over on this one. This spot in Illinois, I did put boots on the ground. All my other spots up until last year, I showed up day of and went in. And I probably was less aggressive because I just kind of wanted to learn the spot as I moved in. This place in Illinois, because the tag was, it's like $500. I wanted to put in a little bit of effort to kind of, stack the odds in my favor. So I went to this spot and found phenomenal sign, the best sign I've ever found ever. And I started putting trail cams up. So I ended up plastering that place. I had 15 cell cams up. So for out of state, I feel like that's a lot of
That's a lot
cameras to put
anywhere.
up. Yeah, here in Michigan, I'm running like 30. So
Oh my God.
yeah, I know. It's like I said, all in, man. So down there, I had 15 up, and I was getting. I put a few of them up on Instagram. Some just phenomenal bucks. So I knew there were bigger bucks on that property, which gave me the confidence to push in further. So that day, I moved 3 times. The third time I set up, I was looking for a tree, and I had a 140-inch 10 point, probably 50 yards from me, but I had set my bow on the ground. And so by the time I got my bow on the ground, I had started to maneuver off, and I just didn't have a shot on it. I quickly climbed up into a tree and watched what the first time I ever experienced a buck parade. And the juries talk about that. And I had probably 7 or 8 bucks, 5 of them being shooters, walk by. So I knew immediately there was a hot doe in the area. I glassed the tree that I needed to be in for the next day, marked that tree, moved my gear over there at night, set it up, and then left and came back in the next day and killed my buck. So that day I moved 3 times to get in on that buck. And again, that was just that gut feeling. I knew though, because I was there, I knew there were bigger bucks than what I was seeing.
So what
I don't
about
know if
like
that answers it.
yeah, no, that's fine. I think a lot of times we get like married to a spot, and some guys will say,
Mhm.
okay, well, I'm going to give it a morning sit and an evening sit,
Mhm.
and so I'll hunt the evening there. If I don't see anything, I'll hunt the morning, and if I don't see
Yep.
anything by X time, then I'm going to move on or
That's
do
great. I've
whatever.
done that a million times. Yep. That's good. That's a good technique.
But so when you're choosing these spots, like I think that there's a real balance, and I think from like a Michigan mindset, from maybe someone who's not done it enough, there is a very like black and white side of I want to be in a spot where I can see stuff, or I
Mhm.
want to be in a situation to kill a deer,
Mhm.
and so I think maybe like picking the kill tree like is
Mhm.
where a lot of people like they want to make sure they want to see. When we talked to Brandon Egan, he was saying, you know you can't try to like split the difference. You can't try to shoot both trails. Like you just kind
Mhm.
of got to pick one. You can't be greedy, right? So when it comes down to like picking a tree, and that one maybe it kind of jumped out at you because you
Mhm.
saw 8 bucks and maybe
I watched
five of
them.
them went right all by that tree. Like if I would have been
Yep.
sitting in that tree, I could have killed them. But it like say when you kill in 15 minutes the first year, you're back, and then kind of build off
Mhm.
of that. Like what is it that you're looking for in that spot? So you can get into a pinch, you can get into a fence line, you can get into any of these corners where everything comes together, but too far out on the edge and now you're
Mhm.
just hanging out, you might as well be hunting a field edge, and too far inside and you can't see what's going on and you feel like you're out of the action. So how are you choosing that kill tree?
Yeah. Up until last year, I think a lot of the trees that I've set up on are pinch points on downwind side of bedding. And again, like I just to stress it, like I've got a simple mindset. I'm not going in and shooting these, huge bucks. That's a whole different game. But if you're looking at just getting that first, 110, 120 inch, 125 inch buck, these principles are pretty solid. Downwind of bedding in a pinch point has been kind of my bread and butter. In fact, as I'm kind of just scrolling through the bucks over the last 5 years, all of them, except for the one last year, have been killed that way. Um, I typically like my wind blowing into a spot where they can't get me, or it's less likely that they're going to get me. In Nebraska, that was I was on a 2 acre chunk of CRP with a probably about a 60-yard wide hardwood, pinch. And behind me was a ridge that dropped down 60 feet. And it was like a sharp drop down. My wind was blowing off of there. There's no way they could have got my wind. Downwind of the CRP bedding, killed that buck. Indiana, the one in 15 minutes when I set up, was in a pinch. I walked up the steepest part of the ridge where no buck is going to walk, and had my wind blowing over top of a huge field behind me. I was downwind of bedding in a pinch, and luck plays into this like crazy. I set up on that spot, and when daylight came in, I was happened to be right on top of a scrape, and he came in and worked that scrape, 10 yards from me, and so gave me a broadside shot. Um, I'm trying to think the second buck in Indiana, that one was where 3 edges came together. One was a huge overgrown, it looked like it was probably like something that had gotten logged and just had tall grass. Does were bedding in there, and there was a swamp on one side and hardwood came together, and there was a creek behind me that when I got there, there was an active scrape, and the creek didn't have a crossing behind me. Now, were there deer going through there? Sure. but right behind me there wasn't something. So I set up there with my wind blowing that way. Just keep it really, for that stuff, it's just pretty basic. Again, where I think where I've got messed up, and some of my buddies can attest to it because I'm calling them up. I'm overthinking things and I'm trying to overanalyze. But whenever I go back to that basic idea of pinch point, downwind of bedding, where my wind is pretty safe, I tend to come across, a buck that gets me excited that I want to shoot. So it's a pretty simple recipe. Last year was just different because nothing really set up like that on that piece of property. It was mainly ridges, so ridges are different. The bedding is different there. Wind flows through there differently. And so my strategy was just to move through until I was in the action, and that worked. That ended up working for me.
So one of the things, and you talked about it by being able to pick these different areas where you can, see the check-in, you can see sort of that stuff. When you're going down there, I mean, everybody's going down in the rut. So how are you dealing with, blowing through these properties and running into other hunters or whatever? Like, how do you pick and choose? Because I think one of the things that we've seen with, Spartan Forge, Onyx, base map, like whatever, like all of these things that look good on a map look good to everybody else who's listening to this. So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so Missouri was a good example of that. So 2000, I went to Missouri, and man, I was shocked. I was not ready for that. I hunted. One thing is to stay mobile. Let me back up. So Missouri, when I got there, there were pieces that looked like opening day of gun season up here in Michigan. I mean, there were cars lined up down the road. Now this is bow season, rut time. The parking lots had tents in them, and people were camping everywhere. Down there, what I learned were guys would come in and bow hunt for like the week before gun, and they would also hunt gun. And so they had these huge tents set up. That knocked me back a little bit, but what I did was I just kept going. So I stayed mobile. And when I say mobile, I mean in every aspect. So my truck is set up to be able to sleep in the back of it. Back then, when I was in Missouri, I actually had a trailer. So I was moving from, campsite to campsite. So I would go set up at a campsite, go into the public. If the public was overran, I was able to just jump into my truck, hook up the trailer, go to the next spot. I would spend days traveling trying to find a good spot. The other part too was just realizing that deer are going to move because of the pressure. Once I stopped being afraid of the pressure, it didn't really matter to me as much. So I would go into these spots. If there's somebody there, I would just keep moving, just keep finding another spot. The deer are going to move around those people. Those people are actually going to move the deer towards you if you use them as kind of like almost like pushers for you. So as I'm going in and I find out there's already guys there, I'm thinking, then what are the deer going to do when they come across that person? And then I'm going to set up over on that area. And that was a good method for me. In fact, on that Missouri hunt, I went in, oh man, it was horrible. I got up early in the morning. I'm driving through, the rut was full on. I knew I was going to hit a deer. And sure enough, a doe jumped up out of a ditch, and then a buck ran into the side of my truck. Actually, his antler tore a hole all the way down the side of my truck. I got out, and he was in the middle of the street. He was still alive, and I was going to put him out of his misery. So I went back to my car to be able to do that. Came back, he pops up, jumps up, and takes off into the field, right? So now I'm running late. I get in my truck, I get there. I'm climbing into my tree, and my bow's still on the ground. It's well past daylight now. And 140-inch 10-point comes running 40 yards from me, and my bow's laying on the ground. He got moved by another hunter. These other hunters came in and were sitting on the ground and bumped him up and ran him past me. So I don't know if he would even came past me if I would have got there, and those guys weren't there. So part of it, you just got to realize it could benefit you. those bucks are moving during that time of year, so it's not going to like ruin your hunting. Now, if the spot is blown up and there's way too many hunters, well, then you got to be prepared to leave your campsite and go find another campsite and go find another piece of public. And I think that is crucial. Like I have bounced in the state, I have driven even Nebraska. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of miles we put in this week, just moving from one spot to another. And being willing to leave our hotel or leave the campground and go to another place. That is so crucial when you're out of state, is not getting married to a specific little corner of the state. Like use the state, go all over.
And when you're talking about the rut, like what are you saying as far as dates? Because I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like with John and I, like it felt like every time we went to Ohio, it was like we were leaving just as it was getting good, or and we went a little bit later, and then we went a little bit later, and then and it just always feels like we are missing it. And so here in Michigan, like our gun season technically November 15th is the rut, but I feel like that October 31st, that week or two leading up to it, I've always seen more action. And I don't know, because I think the interpretation of the rut is different depending on the class of animal that you're hunting, because you got these little bucks running around everywhere. You're like, oh my God, the rut's on. And then you see like the 2 and 3 year olds, like, oh my God, the rut's on. And then you're hunting freaking, Thanksgiving, and then you got these big deer that are locked down with, and so you're like, well, this must be the end of the rut, so like the rut to interpret, like, so when you say, okay, well, I'm going to go for the rut, like when have you, I guess if we were going to say, okay, Matt, what if you could hunt one day, you could only hunt one day during the rut, what's the day for you?
The 6th or 7th of November.
Okay.
Except everything changes, right? So except for this year, I'm planning on going to Illinois on like the 12th. And that's just part of like some of the data that I've gotten from other guys who are down there. So the piece I was on last year, so here's an example of like finding a good piece. Okay. So I went through and I looked at all the public land down there, and there was a piece, I got to be careful. I don't want to say too much. There was a piece that showed low numbers of hunters and low numbers of deer harvested. And you could look at that and think, well, then it's not a good area. But if you look at it on a map and you're in Illinois, so that's just something on its own, right? You look at this piece and there's plenty of ag and there's plenty of hardwood. What it said to me was this was just a piece that wasn't being hunted, that there wasn't a lot of people hunting public. There's a lot of locals here, but it's being missed by out-of-staters. And sure enough, that is exactly what I found out. So I went down there and I killed on, I think it was November 6th. And November 5th, I saw that buck parade. And I ran into a guy down there who's also from Michigan, who's hunted that piece for the last 15 years. And he's like, this isn't even the good time. He's like, come back. Like the 12th is when it really starts going. And he started showing me buck after buck. Now he's killing bucks much bigger than I am. He's killing, 150s, 160s on a regular basis down there. And he's doing it later in November. So he'll do it from the 12th all the way into their gun season, which is around, I think it's Thanksgiving for Illinois, right around that time period. So this year I'm actually shifting a little bit, and I'm also shifting because I'm pouring myself into Michigan and trying to get it done here, because I've been primarily an out-of-state hunter. So I want to hunt kind of that last October, early November here, and then transition into Illinois. Everywhere else, I've always left. Indiana a couple years ago, I went the last week of October because I wanted to avoid some of the rush. The reason why I did that was because I was right on the border of Indiana and Michigan. And so it's a cheap tag, and it's easy for Michigan people to jump the border and just go down there and hunt. So I figured that area was going to be busy during the rut. So I wanted to go down the last week of October. And again, I'm hunting 120-inch bucks. And so they're going to move a little bit differently than those older, more mature, bigger bucks do. So I was confident I could do that early and still see the caliber of buck that I wanted to shoot. And I could, within 4 days, that's what we were on. So usually November 4th though, and I'll hunt about 10 days. So I'll go all the way into the 14th or somewhere around there. And that's usually the time period of when I'm hunting out of state.
So shifting gears a little bit now that you're gonna throw yourself into Michigan,
Yeah.
like what's changed? Like how is your approach different here now that you have, I feel like that's what happens with, some locals, and especially like private land guys, where they're like, well, I got all the time in the world and I've got these deer on camera or these deer around or whatever. Like, how is your approach shifting, and does it mess up your time frame because of quote unquote what the rut is here in Michigan versus Illinois, Kansas, whatever?
Yeah. So I guess in the short answer to that is I don't think much is going to change as far as my approach goes. I thought it would. So I've put in just roughly over 200 miles of scouting this year, and I'm running about 30 cameras, half of those being cell cams, the other half SD. I'm on a 6,000 acre piece that's mainly hardwoods with some ag kind of mixed in and about. And I thought what I thought was going to happen was I was going to put in all of this scouting and I was going to get my spots, kind of pinned down. I was going to probably develop a pattern on some deer. And I think the scouting was good for me because I was able to learn the lay of the land. I know the topography of it now. I've got a good idea of how the deer are going to use it. But my methods are probably going to be the same. I'm going to carry my deer on my back when I first go in there, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move in until I see, hot sign. For me, hot sign early season is going to be feeding, acorns. I'm going to be looking for, deer droppings, like a lot of them, big tracks. I've been focusing a lot on tracks down here. And then kind of correlate it with my camera data a little bit and set up around there, but I'm going to be aggressive. I'm not going to be afraid about blowing out the buck, and I'm going to keep moving. One thing the cameras have helped me do here is realize there's a lot more shooter bucks to go after than what I would have thought originally. So that's given me more confidence to stay aggressive and just hunt the way that I do out of state. Honestly, I mean, that has been huge for me. The number of shooter bucks I have on camera has given me the confidence to push hard. I don't think I would push that hard, right? Like if I only had like one or two bucks that I wanted to kill on camera, I probably would overthink it and sit out too far. I will have that tendency. It's funny I talk about being aggressive, but if I were to only think there were a few, deer that I wanted to shoot, I would probably try to like overthink it and play the edges and probably would ruin it by doing that. But knowing what I have on this area, I'm just going to go in just like I do out of state. The time frame, I'm just going to hunt as much as I can, actually. I have a friend who kills he shot a 175 a couple years ago, and he's telling me, don't do that. Don't hunt as much as you can. That's what Michigan guys do, and that's how they ruin it. I think Michigan guys overhunt the same area. I think they, in general, we hunt our stand. We've got a couple areas that we like to sit. That's not what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be bouncing around based on the camera data. I'm not hunting my cameras, but in correlation with where they're feeding and what I'm seeing and tracks on the ground. So I'm going to be super aggressive. I don't care if I blow the buck out. There's enough. I'm on 6,000 acres. I can keep chasing them. and there's enough bucks to chase. So if I'm on it in November, like if I feel like I'm getting close to killing, um, this year I'm going to favor Michigan over leaving somewhere else, and I'll just end up hunting later in Illinois. I'm planning on leaving the 12th because I don't hunt gun, unless it's the bow only area and I'm using a bow. So there's probably a good chance right around that time period I'm going to Illinois. But I don't think my method is going to change. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. It'll change based on this, where we're at, if it's rut or if it's early season. But I'm just going to stay aggressive and just keep moving, bouncing all over.
So call your shot. When's the first deer hit the ground for the
Crap.
great white saddle hunter?
Man, I don't want to do that at all. Last week of October here in Michigan. I'm pretty confident that I'll, probably within 5 days out of state, I'll get one there too. But I'm not that guy. I'm not a great hunter. I'm really not, and that's what I really
You're just
want
a
people
white
to.
saddle hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think what I want to encourage guys to do is get out of state, get out there and go, because there's bigger deer out there. And like I said, again, if you're willing to shoot a 120 and that gets your heart rate going, you can do that. Now, I will tell you this, I'm starting to get a point in my career where, I'm not going to shoot, the 120s in Illinois, or even, probably most states anymore, unless for some odd reason my heart really starts pounding. Then I'll always do that. I want to have fun. I don't want to get caught up in numbers. But I am into challenging myself. And so this year, like, I have set for Illinois, a bigger goal. In Michigan, though, I mean, hey, a 110 can come walking in and get me really excited, and an arrow's probably going to fly. I'm hoping I can hold off for like a 120. But if I get excited, it's I'm gonna let the arrow go. I don't care what it looks like. I'm not too concerned about that. So
I love that. So what are you doing like prior to the last week of October? Like, because I feel like one of the goals that I try to set every year and I fail, but I mean, last year I just screwed it up. But like to kill one early, like you're doing all of the work,
yeah.
and I understand like fully, like my successes have come, generally speaking, like during the rut,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's when you have the best chance. That's when you can be a mediocre hunter and the deer
Mm-hmm.
make the mistake, right? But we're putting in all the work and we're saying, okay, we're going to go locate these bucks and we're going to do all this work and we're going to do this. And it's like, I feel like an early season kill is like, to me, like somewhat
Yeah.
of validation for all the work that you put in. Like, you could put in all the work in the world and Joe Blow can sit down, in his flannel with his cigarette and his crossbow and kill one in the rut because he put his bucket in the right spot,
Yep.
So that, how do you view early season then?
Yeah. So I mean, this is my first early season. I mean, besides going out of state and hunting other states, like I've hunted Wisconsin early season, Nebraska, which by the way I've struck out every time. The guy that I went with, Chris, this year, he got a good, probably about 130-inch 8-point velvet. But this is my first season because, like ever since coming back, I've just focused on being efficient, picking the week that I feel like I can get it done, and then getting it done as fast as I can so I can get back to the family. This year, my kids are, it's funny, it's a lot changes in 1 year with your kids. Like, my kids are teenagers now. I got 2 of them in high school, and all of a sudden it's like, we don't care. Like, we don't need you around. Like, leave us alone. And so my wife's like, go ahead, like dive all the way in, do whatever you want to do. So it's been exciting for me. Um, the reason why I'm not like super confident is because this is a pretty big piece of big woods. I found, I'm not exaggerating because I counted them, at least 120 beds. I've scouted 200 miles. I've been out there since January 1. I'm out there every single weekend. And what I've learned, and I've set cameras up around these beds. I've done things, to try to see if I can find a pattern. and what I'm finding is that there's lack of a pattern. Like I'm sure there's a monster buck that has his spot that I haven't found because I don't have the skills to find that he's using 2-3 beds that keep him completely safe and all of that. But the type of deer that I'm going after, what I've seen, based on running 30 cameras this year, I've had bucks a mile apart from day to day. So I've caught them, on a camera a mile away, and the next day, they're down the road and in a different area. I find them bedding all over the place, based off convenience and wind and terrain. Um, so it's been really hard to even try to attempt to get a pattern. I thought that's what I was going to do. Like my whole goal this year was to be like a mini Jake Bush and go in and like get this little, find a 120 incher that I could pattern and take out the first week. And I found out, like, at least for me and my skills, it just hasn't happened. I've got general areas where I know bucks are, but they keep shocking me. Like I'm getting the same bucks on camera over and over again, but it's not the same camera. And what I'm finding out is they're bedding in different areas based on food. I've watched, that's been a lot of fun to be able to watch this season and watch them shift from primarily alfalfa to what I think they've moved into is corn, and then bouncing back to alfalfa every once in a while. And then when the acorns came in, I had set up some cameras on some oaks, some old oaks, just knowing that, hoping that they'd produce. And I've watched, that has been amazing to watch the acorns start to drop, and then the cameras just explode. And then I've got, bucks on cameras for 3-4 days, and then they clear out what's on the ground, and then they're gone. So what that told me was chase the food. Early season, that's what I'm going to be doing. It's just chasing the food, trying to find them. In the area that I'm in, there's not a bumper crop of acorns, which I'm thankful for, but there are acorn producing trees. And so that's what I've been doing lately, is just going out, glassing those, finding the oaks. And I'll be chasing acorns probably for the first, week or so.
Yeah, I think that's what we're ended up doing with our Patreon hunt. That was what killed all the deer last year, was, just locating the tracks going in, follow the tracks going in, and oh my God, there's the food, and that's when the deer started to die. So looking forward to that again this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this has been fun. You were a little nervous coming on here,
Yeah.
first podcast. I think to take away from it is very like a positive attitude. Like go in there, don't overthink it. And I think guys can really take away from that.
Yeah. So I almost forgot, like it's been so long. So I always ask one of our guests, what's your bow and what's your setup? So I heard you say V3 earlier, but
Yep.
give us all the details on your setup.
Yeah, 27-inch V3. I'm shooting black gold sights. I forgot the name of the dropaway rest that I have on there. It's been on there for a couple of years now. I'm running a little bit heavier setup, not too heavy. Can't even tell you the grains on it. I don't get too caught up in all of that kind of stuff. I go to long range archery and just, hey, give it to them and get it shooting right, and then going from there. I did switch. So I was shooting black hornets last year. And they did great. I think I might have been getting into the whole ranch fairy dust a little bit. And this year I went to a 2-inch mega meat, expandable, just based off of what those guys were telling me. They've killed like 20 some deer with them and have had no problems with it. So I went to that because I was going to Nebraska and I thought I was going to be taking longer shots. And ended up never throwing an arrow, but I'm still going to run with them through the season. They shoot good out of the bow. Long range is, those guys down there, I can't even like toot their horn enough, because once they tune my bow, it's good with whatever broadhead I throw on it. I really don't have to make too many adjustments. So the 27-inch was interesting. I bought that about 2 years ago. And as soon as I bought it, I thought I made a huge mistake. So I was like, torquing the bow left and right and couldn't get a steady, just shot going. But now I shoot every day. So I shoot 30 yards in my backyard, probably about 10 arrows a day. And I don't think there's many days I miss shooting. So now I'm super confident with it. I'm running a latitude and method 2 saddle, 0.5 lone wolf custom gear. I'll probably just be in the saddle 90% of the time. I use a Rebel platform. And then I've got various sticks, but I'm using some old lone wolf sticks that I customized probably most of the year. Pretty lightweight going in. I don't bring a whole lot of stuff with me. I think my heaviest, if I'm packed everything I want with it, I've weighed it. I think I'm around 18 pounds with everything. Most of the time I'm much lighter than that. But
Nice.
yeah.
So being an old school guy, are you still shooting fingers, or you got release?
Yeah, no, not quite fingers, but I can't switch to like the tension release. I'm still on the trigger. I still punch that thing too, like I'm shooting a gun, like just going with it. But most of my shots, honestly, like are 10, 15 yards. I do find myself, because I'm downwind of bedding a lot, I'm in some thicker stuff. So, the need to shoot 30 yards isn't there, but I can shoot, 50 yards just fine. But I don't think I'll ever have that opportunity to do that where I hunt. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
Well, I mean, we said Great White Saddle Hunter on Instagram. Anywhere else people can figure out where to follow you or reach out to you if they got questions on like these WMAs with nobody on them?
Yeah. Yeah, that one actually, there's only 2 guys that whole year on there, but and me, I was one of them. Great White Saddle Hunter on Instagram. I'm on Facebook too, but Instagram's mainly what I kind of interact with. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you taking the time, and we'll have to maybe December catch up and kind of swap some stories and see how it goes. So
yeah,
thanks
sounds good.
again.
Yeah, thanks a lot.